The night sky above the small town was starless, a blanket of cold blackness swallowing the horizon. The wind howled through empty streets, carrying whispers of dread. Inside a rundown diner on the outskirts, a bruised and bloodied mercenary stumbled in, clutching his ribs. His face was streaked with grime, and his breath came in short, ragged bursts. Patrons stared as he collapsed into a booth, knocking over a cup of coffee. The waitress approached cautiously, her voice trembling. You okay, mister?" The mercenary's eyes darted wildly, like a cornered animal. "You need to leave," he croaked. "You all need to leave." "What happened?" the waitress asked, backing away. "She's here," he whispered. "She's coming." His voice cracked on the last word. Frost. The room went silent. The name landed like a gunshot. Forks froze halfway to mouths. A trucker in the corner muttered, "Poor bastard." The waitress paled, grabbed her coat, and bolted out the door. A chain reaction followed, and within moments the diner emptied, leaving the mercenary alone at his table. He wiped sweat from his brow, flinching as he touched a swollen bruise. Behind him, a shadow moved. "You should have left with the rest," a cold voice said. The mercenary spun around, but all he saw was a flicker, a blur of movement, before something hard struck him across the face. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Miles away, a group of heavily armed alien mercenaries were camped out inside a dimly lit warehouse. The Carnac Raiders were among the galaxy's most feared bounty hunters, brutal, relentless, and efficient. Their leader, a towering brute named Carnac, paced like a caged beast. The alien's crimson skin shimmered under the flickering overhead lights. His 4 eyes narrowed in frustration as one of his scouts returned empty-handed. "She's still out there," the scout stammered. "We lost 4 men already. She's toying with us." Carnac's lips curled back in a sneer. "We're wasting time." He slammed his fist on a crate, denting the steel. "One scientist can't stop us. She's flesh and blood like the rest of them." "That's no scientist," the scout muttered. "She's a monster." "Enough!" Carnac roared, towering over him. "She's just a woman." "No," a grizzled veteran interrupted. His voice was low, grave. "She's Lena Frost." The room fell silent. Even Carnac hesitated. The name was whispered across criminal networks and war zones alike. Lena Frost, a black ops ghost who once dismantled an entire cartel using nothing but improvised explosives and a sniper rifle. Survivors claimed she was part machine, others swore she was a rogue experiment that couldn't die. Some believed she was pure myth. But the truth was far worse. "She's one person," Carnac said firmly. "We've crushed entire planets." The veteran shook his head. "If she's here, we're not the hunters anymore." That night, the Carnac Raiders moved quietly through the town's streets, clad in sleek armor that shimmered in the dark. Their scanners flickered constantly, searching for her presence. Houses were left dark and empty, residents having fled or barricaded themselves indoors. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound like a whisper of warning. They reached her house, a simple one-story building with a battered porch and peeling paint. Carnac sneered. This was their feared target. He gestured, and 2 mercenaries moved forward. One knelt by the door, producing a high-tech lockpick. The second crept to the window, peering inside. The man by the door tapped a code into his device, and the lock clicked open. He pushed the door in slowly. The entire porch exploded. Splinters of wood and jagged metal tore through the air, sending the 2 mercenaries flying back like ragdolls. Carnac swore and barked orders. The remaining team surged forward. Inside, the house was rigged like a war zone, wires snaked along the walls, leading to homemade traps and automated turrets that sprang to life the moment someone crossed the threshold. Bullets rained from the ceiling. A drone whirred out of a closet and fired a high-voltage stun blast, dropping another mercenary. "Fall back!" Carnac shouted, dragging one of his injured men out the door. The raiders regrouped on the street, panting and wounded. A cold, disembodied voice echoed from a speaker hidden in the wreckage. You should have left while you could. Carnac's 4 eyes narrowed. You think you're clever? He growled into the darkness. I'll burn this town to the ground if I have to. You won't get the chance, the voice replied. Because you won't leave this town alive. In a blur of motion, a shadow darted across the rooftops. One mercenary spotted it, raising his rifle just in time for a throwing knife to bury itself in his throat. He dropped without a sound. She's in the wind, one of the mercenaries shouted. Doesn't matter, Carnac sparked. We're staying. We take her tonight. For hours, Lena hunted them, isolating one, then another, striking hard and fast before melting back into the dark. She used the terrain like a weapon, weaving through alleyways and abandoned homes. When they found her trail, it always led to another ambush, razor wire, trip mines, or explosive charges that sent debris flying through the night. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, the Carnac Raiders had lost half their team. The survivors were bloody, exhausted, and terrified. Carnac sat slumped against the wall, clutching his scorched arm. His pride stung worse than the burns. One mercenary muttered, We need to go, before she wipes us all out. Carnac's face twisted in rage. No, he spat. We finish this. A shadow stepped into the dim morning light, Lena Frost herself. She stood in front of them, calm and unmoving. Dressed in tactical gear, her sharp eyes fixed on Carnac's. A sleek pistol gleamed in her hand. You think you're brave, she said quietly. But you're just too stupid to know when you've lost. Carnac reached for his weapon, but Lena's shot hit first, not a bullet, but an electric pulse that sent him spasming to the ground. The remaining mercenaries bolted, dragging Carnac with them. You tell whoever sent you, Lena called after them. Earth isn't your playground. Her voice hardened. And if you come back, I'll be waiting. As the mercenaries vanished into the distance, Lena's gaze lingered on the horizon. She knew this wasn't over. Carnac wasn't the only threat, and whatever they were truly after, it wasn't her they feared most. It was what she was protecting. The artifact still lay hidden. And someone far worse than the Carnac Raiders would be coming for it. The air was cold and heavy the next morning, a sharp breeze whistling through the damaged streets. Broken glass crunched under Lena's boots as she walked past the charred remains of her booby-trapped home. She didn't slow down to assess the damage, it was just a house. A temporary shelter, nothing more. What mattered was the artifact, and the mercenaries weren't going to give up easily. She knew their kind. The Carnac Raiders were too stubborn, too ruthless to let humiliation be the end of it. They would come back, and next time they wouldn't underestimate her. Lena crossed through an alleyway and slipped into a rundown auto repair shop. The stale smell of oil and grease lingered in the air. Inside, a lanky man with scruffy hair and a grease-stained shirt jumped in surprise when she appeared. Holy hell! Ray yelped, dropping the wrench he was holding. Could you not just sneak up on people like that? You're too loud, Lena said flatly. If I were a Carnac mercenary, you'd be dead. Ray wiped his hands on his shirt, shaking his head. Yeah? Well, if you were a Carnac mercenary, I'd have hit you with this. He grabbed a wrench off the table and tried to twirl it menacingly. It slipped from his grip and clattered loudly to the floor. He groaned. Look, lady, I'm just a mechanic. I don't know what you're mixed up in, but these alien war freaks aren't my problem. They will be, Lena said. They'll burn the whole town down if they think you know something. And right now, they don't know how much you've seen. Ray's face paled. I didn't see anything. I mean, okay, I saw you blowing up your own house, but that's your business. They think you're working with me now, Lena replied. Whether you like it or not. Ray's face twitched with panic. You're kidding. I'm not. Lena moved to the corner of the garage and opened a metal toolbox. Inside lay a custom-built pulse rifle, sleek and modified for precision. She took it, slung it over her back, and tossed Ray a small handheld device. What's this? Ray asked. Motion tracker, Lena said. If you see red dots, that's them. Ray stared at her, horrified. I'm not a fighter. You don't have to be, Lena said. Just listen, stay quiet, and do what I say. Hours later, Ray regretted every decision that led him to this moment. He huddled in a cramped, dust-filled storage room in the back of his garage while Lena quietly reinforced the doors with improvised explosives and jagged wires. She moved methodically, silent and focused, as if she'd done this 100 times before. The tension gnawed at Ray's nerves. You don't talk much, do you? Ray muttered. You know, normal people talk when they're about to die. We're not going to die, Lena replied without looking up. Yeah? Ray snorted. Because from where I'm sitting, it sure feels like we're about to. Lena finally turned, her cold gaze meeting his. If you can't stay calm, you'll get yourself killed. Focus. Before Ray could reply, a sharp beep sounded from the motion tracker on the table. Red dots flared to life on the screen, a lot of them. Ray's heart hammered in his chest. They're here. Lena didn't react with panic. Instead, she quietly knelt beside the door, her pulse rifle balanced on her knee. The faint shuffle of boots echoed outside, growing louder. Shadows flickered past the garage's windows. Someone rattled the front door, testing it. The lock held, but Lena's grip on the trigger tightened. The door exploded inward. A Carnac mercenary stormed inside, armored head to toe and wielding a plasma rifle. Before he could react, Lena fired a precise shot that sent him sprawling to the floor. Sparks danced across his scorched armor. Another mercenary rushed in from the side, but Lena was faster, rolling behind a workbench and firing twice more. The second mercenary collapsed with a gurgling choke. Stay down! Lena barked at Ray, who was doing his best impression of a turtle behind a pile of tires. Carnac soldiers swarmed the garage. One vaulted over a car hood, his blade flashing. Lena ducked and drove the barrel of her rifle into his stomach before pulling the trigger. He crumpled. 2 more poured through the side door. Lena spun and fired her remaining rounds in rapid succession, forcing them back. She yanked a wrench from the table and flung it across the room, striking one mercenary in the helmet hard enough to stagger him. Ray peeked out just in time to see Lena leap across the room, tackling the remaining soldier to the ground. She drove her elbow into his face, then grabbed his knife and plunged it into his chest. The soldier stopped moving. For a brief moment, there was silence. The air reeked of burned metal and ozone. You, Ray stammered. You just took out like 6 of them. 7, Lena corrected, reloading her rifle. And there's more coming. As if on cue, the sound of heavy boots thundered outside. Lena grabbed Ray by the arm and pulled him toward the back exit. They stumbled into the alley just in time to see Carnac soldiers swarming the main road. The town's streets were crawling with mercenaries, far more than Lena had anticipated. We need to split up, Lena said. They won't waste time chasing you. They're after me. Oh yeah, great plan, Ray muttered. I'll just wander off and get vaporized. You won't, Lena said. Because you're going to do something smart for once. Hey! Ray shot back. That's uncalled for. You're going to get to the old radio tower. Lena continued. There's a military frequency there. Call for help. Ray's eyes widened. What kind of help? The kind that doesn't ask questions, Lena said, gripping his shoulder tightly. Just get there. I'll keep them busy. Ray knew arguing was pointless. He sprinted into the night, heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, explosions rocked the air as Lena's traps began to detonate. The mercenaries roared in anger as their forces were torn apart by well-placed explosives and collapsing debris. Ray reached the radio tower half an hour later, drenched in sweat and out of breath. The ancient equipment crackled to life as he tuned it to the right frequency. Static hissed in his ear until finally, a sharp voice barked through the speaker. Identify yourself. I'm with Lena Frost, Ray shouted. She's under attack. Send help now. The voice on the other end fell silent for a moment. Then, a grim reply. Hold tight, kid. Help's coming. Ray slumped in relief, but his victory was short-lived. Out the window, he saw a figure moving toward the tower. A tall, hulking shape, Carnac himself. Lena's traps wouldn't stop him. Ray had seconds before the mercenary found him. He grabbed a crowbar from the corner, his hand shaking. He'd never fought anyone before, let alone a warlord with alien tech. But Lena had trusted him. He couldn't let her down. As Carnac's shadow loomed closer, Ray gritted his teeth and whispered to himself, "Don't die like an idiot! Don't die like an idiot!" The door burst open. The cold air stung Ray's face as Carnac's towering silhouette filled the doorway. The alien warlord's crimson skin gleamed under the flickering light of the radio tower's interior. His armor clanked as he stepped inside, each footfall heavy and deliberate. The curved blade in his hand gleamed wickedly, its edge pulsing with a faint red glow. Ray clutched the crowbar tighter, but his sweaty palms betrayed his grip. "You're wasting your time," Carnac growled, his deep voice vibrating through the room. "Your friend won't save you. Frost can't stop what's coming." Ray's heart thundered in his chest. He knew he didn't stand a chance, but giving up wasn't an option. He darted to the side, swinging the crowbar wildly. Carnac sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing Ray's wrist mid-swing. The alien's strength was overwhelming, his grip like an iron vice. Ray cried out as Carnac twisted his arm and sent him crashing into the table. The radio crackled as equipment scattered across the floor. "I admire your courage," Carnac sneered. "But you're out of your league." Before Carnac could finish him, a streak of light shot through the doorway, a precise bolt of energy that struck Carnac in the side. The warlord staggered back with a snarl. Lena stood in the entrance, her rifle raised, smoke trailing from its barrel. "You never should have come here," Lena said coldly. Carnac grunted, clutching his side. "You've already lost," he spat. "The artifact isn't just a weapon, it's a beacon. My men have activated it. The Carnac fleet is coming." Lena's expression remained stone cold, but Ray's face twisted in horror. "Wait, what?" "Every Carnac warship in the sector," Carnac continued, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "You think you've won just because you're clever? You've only delayed your extinction." Lena lunged forward before he could speak another word, firing twice more. Carnac stumbled back, cursing as he ducked out the door. The warlord vanished into the darkness, leaving Lena and Ray alone in the wreckage. "We're dead," Ray said, clutching his ribs. "We're so dead." "Not yet," Lena replied, already checking her weapon's charge. "If he's telling the truth, we've got maybe an hour before those ships start descending." "An hour?" Ray wheezed. "You don't happen to have a spaceship hidden in your backpack, do you?" Lena ignored him and reached for a nearby map, spreading it out on the table. Her eyes narrowed as she traced her finger along a winding road leading out of town. "There's a military installation 20 miles west," Lena said. "Old Cold War bunker. Still active. They've got anti-air defenses strong enough to cripple a Carnac fleet if we can get there in time." "That's great," Ray muttered, groaning as he tried to stand. "Except for one tiny problem. You saw the streets. They've got mercenaries everywhere. We won't make it 2 blocks. Lena pulled a small device from her pocket, a sleek, palm-sized sphere that blinked faintly. Ray recognized it as one of her homemade explosives. "Yeah," Lena said grimly. "We won't, unless we give them something else to chase." 30 minutes later, explosions shook the heart of the town. Smoke plumed into the sky as abandoned cars and makeshift traps detonated in succession, drawing the mercenaries' attention away from the outskirts. Lena and Ray moved quickly, weaving through backyards, cutting through alleys, staying low as Carnac soldiers swarmed toward the decoy explosions. The sounds of distant gunfire rang out, mercenaries firing wildly into empty streets, fooled by the traps Lena had rigged. They reached the road leading west, but their path wasn't clear for long. Ahead, a Carnac patrol was stationed near a broken-down gas station. A hulking mercenary stood guard beside a mounted plasma cannon, scanning the road. Lena motioned for Ray to stay low. I'll take out the big one, Lena whispered. You take the one by the truck. Me? Ray's voice cracked. You want me to, what? Throw a rock? You've got my backup gun, Lena reminded him. Ray swallowed hard and fumbled for the pistol in his jacket pocket. He had never fired a weapon before. His hand shook as he gripped it. Wait for my signal, Lena murmured, disappearing into the shadows. Moments later, Lena struck with surgical precision. Her blade plunged into the neck of the armored brute by the plasma cannon before he could shout. The second mercenary turned just as Ray staggered forward, raising the pistol. His finger trembled on the trigger. Stop! The mercenary barked, aiming his weapon. Ray fired. The shot missed, by several feet. The Carnac soldier sneered and raised his rifle. Before he could fire, Lena's knife whistled through the air and embedded itself in the mercenary's arm. The alien screamed, dropping his weapon as Ray scrambled forward, firing 3 more wild shots. One struck the mercenary's leg, sending him sprawling. I got him? Ray gasped, staring at the smoking gun in disbelief. You hit something, Lena muttered, grabbing him by the arm. That's progress. They pushed onward, racing through the empty countryside. The hills rolled endlessly before them, their target still miles away. Above, the sky began to darken. Faint specks of light flickered, Carnac's ships descending from orbit like burning stars. We're running out of time, Ray muttered. They reached the bunker's entrance just as the first Carnac dropship broke through the clouds. Lena pounded on the heavy steel door, shouting into the security camera. This is Lena Frost. Open the gate! Moments passed before the door screeched open, revealing a group of armed soldiers. One of them, a stern-looking officer, scowled. You brought them here, the officer growled. I brought you a warning, Lena shot back. They're coming for that artifact, and they won't stop until they burn this town to the ground. The officer scowled but stepped aside. The bunker's interior hummed with power, consoles blinking, soldiers scrambling to their stations. At the heart of the room stood a sleek control panel connected to an array of missile systems. Ray's mouth fell open. I'm guessing that's the button that saves the world. Before Lena could respond, a deafening boom shook the ground. The Carnac fleet had begun their assault. Plasma strikes rained down on the town, and in the distance, mercenary troops marched toward the bunker's entrance. Lena slammed her fist on the console. Fire everything you've got! Missiles screamed into the sky, trailing white vapor against the dark clouds. They spiraled upward, intercepting the descending Carnac ships in a series of fiery eruptions. One by one, ships exploded mid-air, spiraling out of control and crashing into the earth. It's working! Ray gasped. But Carnac's wasn't finished. A massive Carnac command ship hovered ominously above, too far for the missiles to reach. Carnac's voice echoed over a communication channel. You think you've won? He snarled. This planet will burn. Lena gritted her teeth. Not today! She grabbed a small control device from her pocket, one she'd been preparing all along. With a flick of her thumb, she triggered her final trick. High in orbit, a hidden EMP satellite, one she had reprogrammed years ago, activated. A pulse rippled through the sky, disabling every Carnac ship still in orbit. The command ship lost power, spiraling out of control before crashing far outside the town. The air was thick with the stench of smoke and scorched metal as Lena surveyed the battlefield from the bunker's entrance. The Carnac fleet lay in ruins across the landscape, smoldering debris scattered over the once quiet town. Fires flickered in the distance, and the faint crackle of burning wreckage whispered through the air. The silence felt unnatural, like the breath before a storm. Ray slumped beside her, his face pale and streaked with sweat. His trembling hands still clutched the backup pistol Lena had given him. He kept glancing at it like he couldn't believe he had actually fired it. His voice shook as he spoke. So that's it, right? We won? Lena didn't answer. Her sharp eyes remained locked on the wreckage far out in the hills. She knew better than to believe this was over. Carnac mercenaries didn't scatter like frightened dogs, they regrouped, and they retaliated. Carnac hadn't stayed behind just a command from orbit. He was still alive, and she knew he wouldn't stop until he had what he came for. You should get inside, Lena said quietly. Lock the door and stay down. Ray's face tightened with disbelief. You're not serious. You're going after him? I don't have a choice, Lena said. If Carnac gets his hands on the artifact, this entire planet's at risk. Then let me help, Ray blurted. I can. You'll get yourself killed, Lena cut him off. I need you alive in case this goes wrong. Right, because I've been so useful so far, Ray muttered bitterly. Lena glanced at him, her face momentarily softening. You called for backup when no one else would. You kept your head when everything was falling apart. That counts for something. Before Ray could respond, Lena turned and sprinted into the smoky haze, disappearing into the hills. The air grew colder as Lena moved through the wreckage. Carnac soldiers lay scattered across the dirt, their armor scorched and broken. Some groaned faintly, but most were still and lifeless. She kept moving, rifle ready, senses on high alert. Carnac was close, she could feel it. Near the edge of a shattered supply truck, she found her answer. Footprints, heavy, deep marks pressed into the soil. Carnac's tracks. They led toward a ravine that cut through the hills. The path was narrow and winding, flanked by jagged rock formations that cast sharp shadows in the fading light. Lena followed quietly, staying low. She moved like a ghost, her boots barely brushing the earth. Ahead she glimpsed movement, a tall figure stumbling through the rocks. Carnac's massive form was unmistakable, his armor damaged and charred from the crash. He clutched his side, blood dripping from a gash in his ribs. Even wounded, his steps were heavy and deliberate. Carnac paused at the edge of the ravine, pulling a small device from his belt. The artifact, a crystalline sphere no larger than a grapefruit, gleamed faintly in his palm. It pulsed with an eerie blue light, flickering like a heartbeat. Lena raised her rifle, finger tightening on the trigger. Before she could fire, Carnac turned sharply, his gaze locking onto her through the smoke. His eyes glowed with cold fury. You've followed me far enough, Carnac growled. Lena squeezed the trigger, but Carnac lunged with surprising speed, diving behind a boulder as her shots blasted harmlessly against the rocks. She ducked back just in time to avoid a searing plasma bolt that scorched the dirt beside her. Carnac emerged from cover, firing again. Lena twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast as she returned fire. The two circled each other like predators. Carnac fired wild bursts from his plasma pistol, each shot hissing past her in flashes of burning light. Lena moved methodically, her precision forcing him to stay on the defensive. She knew she couldn't let him get away. The artifact in his possession was far too dangerous. Carnac suddenly lunged forward, tossing his empty pistol aside and drawing a brutal curved blade from his belt. He charged like a freight train, closing the distance before Lena could fire again. She ducked, rolling to the side as his blade slammed into a rock where her head had been a second earlier. You should have stayed hidden, Carnac snarled, slashing again. Lena dodged and countered with her own knife, aiming for his ribs. Carnac twisted, grabbing her wrist in a crushing grip. Pain shot through her arm as he forced her back against the jagged rock wall. His blade hovered inches from her throat. I should kill you now, Carnac sneered. But I think I'll make you watch while I burn this planet to the ground. Lena gritted her teeth and twisted her wrist hard, breaking free from his grasp. She slammed her elbow into his face, sending him staggering back. Before he could recover, she reached for her rifle, but Carnac kicked it away. His blade flashed again, cutting across her shoulder. Blood soaked her sleeve, but she ignored the pain. You can't stop what's coming, Carnac growled. You think you've won, but you're too late. The artifact's already activated. My fleet will come for it. Lena's gaze flicked to the device in Carnac's hand. The crystal's glow had intensified, its pulsing light now a steady rhythm. She realized with horror that Carnac wasn't lying. The artifact was broadcasting a signal, calling for reinforcements. Any surviving Carnac forces in the sector would arrive soon. You brought this on yourself. Carnac sneered. Not yet, Lena muttered. Before Carnac could react, Lena lunged. Her hand shot out, snatching the artifact from his grip. Carnac roared in rage and slashed at her again, but Lena ducked and smashed the artifact against a rock with all her strength. The crystal splintered, flickering violently before shattering in a burst of energy. The shockwave knocked both of them back, throwing Carnac against the rocky wall. Lena forced herself to her feet, panting heavily. Carnac lay slumped against the stone, blood trickling from his head. His breathing was shallow and ragged. You're done, Lena said quietly. Carnac coughed weakly, his lips curling into a grim smile. There will be others, he rasped. More will come. And next time, you won't survive. I'll be ready, Lena said. Without another word, she turned and walked away. By the time Lena returned to the bunker, Ray was waiting by the entrance. His face brightened when he saw her, but his smile faltered when he noticed the blood on her arm. You're hurt, Ray said. I've had worse, Lena replied. So, is it over? Ray asked. For now, Lena said. But this isn't the last time someone comes looking for what's out there. Ray stared at her, concern flickering in his eyes. You're not planning on sticking around, are you? Can't, Lena said. Too many enemies. Too many people who'd rather see me dead. Ray scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Well, if you ever need a mechanic who's terrible in a fight but somehow still alive, I'll be here. Lena smirked faintly. I'll keep that in mind. As she turned to leave, Ray called after her. Hey, Lena, why does everyone seem so afraid of you? Lena paused, her gaze distant. Because they know what I'm willing to do, she said quietly. And they know I don't lose. She disappeared into the smoke, her silhouette fading into the morning light. The legend of Lena Frost would continue to spread, whispered in the shadows, feared by criminals, and respected by those who knew the truth. The mercenaries had thought Earth would be easy prey. They thought Lena Frost was just a name, until they learned what it really meant. The wind howled through the empty streets as Lena walked alone down the ruined roads of the town. Smoke lingered in the air, curling like black tendrils from the wreckage of Carnac's ships that still smoldered in the distance. The night was cold, but she barely felt it. Her mind was racing, her thoughts stuck in a loop of what had just happened and what was still to come. Carnac was defeated, his fleet destroyed, but deep down she knew this wasn't over. The artifact may have been shattered, but someone, somewhere, had heard its signal. The Carnac Raiders weren't the only threat in this galaxy, and the trail they'd followed to Earth could lead others. Lena paused near the wreckage of one of the Carnac dropships, its twisted metal barely recognizable. The bodies of mercenaries lay scattered nearby, their armor scorched and broken. She felt no triumph in the sight, only a grim certainty that more blood would be spilled in the days to come. War was like that. No matter how many you killed, there was always someone waiting to take their place. A faint noise behind her made Lena spin, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. A figure stumbled out of a nearby alley, a young woman no older than 20, her face streaked with dirt. She clutched a bloody towel to her arm, her eyes wide with fear. You're her, the woman stammered. You're Lena Frost. Lena kept her weapon lowered but didn't ease her stance. You hurt? She asked. I'll live, the woman muttered. But my brother, he's still out there. I think those things took him. Lena felt her chest tighten. She had seen the Carnac Raiders drag people off during their retreat. Survivors were often taken as bargaining chips or worse. It was possible her brother was still alive, but if the mercenaries had left town with him, they wouldn't stay alive for long. Where did you last see him? Lena asked. The woman pointed toward the far edge of town, where the hills met the tree line. Out there. Near the old gas station. They grabbed him when we were trying to get away. Lena gave a short nod. Get to the bunker, she said. The soldiers will keep you safe. What if you don't come back? The woman asked. Then I wasn't good enough, Lena replied and turned away. The path toward the gas station was littered with debris, overturned cars, shattered windows, and burn marks scarring the pavement. Lena moved carefully, knowing Carnac survivors could still be lurking. She kept her rifle close, scanning the shadows. The silence felt wrong, too empty, too still. When she reached the gas station, the first thing she noticed was the streak of blood smeared across the cracked pavement. Drag marks led away from the building, disappearing into the trees. She followed the trail cautiously, weaving between the trees and staying low. The footprints were heavy, suggesting at least 2 mercenaries carrying a body. The blood trail was still fresh. They couldn't be far. As she crept deeper into the woods, she caught faint voices up ahead. Lena stopped, crouching behind a fallen log. Carnac soldiers stood in a clearing, huddled around a battered military truck. 2 of them were arguing in low voices, while a third stood guard over a figure bound and gagged on the ground. The prisoner was a boy, no older than 16, his face bruised and streaked with dirt. His terrified eyes flickered toward the guard, who grunted and prodded him with the butt of his rifle. "Fleet's gone," one mercenary grumbled. "We're wasting our time." "We'll trade the kid," the other snapped. "Someone will pay to keep their family alive." "You think Frost's gonna let that happen?" the first mercenary scoffed. "She's out there somewhere. Probably watching us right now." The second mercenary's face twisted with frustration. "She's just one person. If she shows her face, we kill her." "Right," the first mercenary snorted. "Because that works so well for everyone else." Lena smiled grimly. They weren't wrong. She moved quickly, silent as a shadow. The first mercenary didn't even see her coming. Her knife plunged between his ribs, and she dragged him down quietly, lowering his body to the ground before his partner noticed. The second turned too late. Lena shot him twice in the chest, his armor flaring as the plasma bolts punched through. The guard by the prisoner spun, raising his weapon, but Lena was faster. One clean shot to the head dropped him instantly. The boy flinched as she approached, his eyes wide with fear. Lena knelt down and cut the ropes binding his wrists. "You're safe now," she said softly. I thought I was dead," the boy stammered. "You almost were," Lena said. "Let's go." By the time they reached the bunker, the soldiers had secured the town's perimeter. Ray was waiting at the entrance, pacing anxiously. His face lit up with relief when he saw Lena walking beside the rescued boy. "You're getting pretty good at this whole saving the day thing," Ray muttered. "Don't get used to it." Lena shot back, but there was the faintest hint of a smile. Inside the bunker, the soldiers had gathered to discuss the aftermath. The commanding officer, a grizzled veteran named Colonel Briggs, met Lena with a grim expression. "We've secured the area," Briggs said. "But there's more. My scouts found Carnac tech buried near the crash site, some sort of transmitter. Looks like Carnac's activated it before you took him down." Lena's stomach twisted. The artifact's signal may have been destroyed, but if Carnac's managed to transmit his position before the EMP pulse hit, there was no telling what might come next. "More are coming," Lena said flatly. Briggs nodded. "We're reinforcing the bunker. If they come, we'll be ready." Lena shook her head. "You won't be ready. They won't fight like Carnac soldiers. They'll send assassins. Spies. Saboteurs." "So what do we do?" Ray asked quietly. "You stay low," Lena said. "Stay quiet. Don't draw attention to yourselves." "And you?" Ray asked. "I keep moving," Lena said. "I made too many enemies today. Staying here puts everyone else in danger." Ray frowned. "You can't just run forever." Lena's gaze hardened. "I don't run," she said. "I hunt." The next morning, Lena slipped away before the town had fully woken. Her belongings were few: a rifle, a knife, and a small pack of supplies. As she reached the highway, she paused and glanced back at the town. People were starting to emerge from their homes, repairing what they could and mourning what they couldn't. They had survived the Carnac invasion, but Lena knew that peace wouldn't last. The galaxy was cruel, and Earth had just become a bigger target. As she turned back to the road, she found Ray standing there, arms crossed. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "Yes, I do," Lena replied. Ray didn't argue. He knew better. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed her something small, a worn-out keychain shaped like a wrench. "For luck," Ray said awkwardly. Lena stared at it for a moment before slipping it into her pocket. "Thanks," she muttered. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the haze of morning mist. The legend of Lena Frost had grown that day, whispered in the corners of the galaxy by those who feared her name. Alien mercenaries had come to Earth thinking they were chasing an easy target. They had underestimated her. They hadn't understood what her name really meant, until it was too late.